So next up is Jorge. He's from Spain. I hope that was pronounced okay, was it?
Yes.
And Jorge is going to speak to us about the retail sector. Jorge is currently, he works for Broadway Mile in Madrid. He's chairman of America's operations and director of the Broadway Mile in Holdings Board. With 30 years experience working across Spain and also in South America. So I think I'll hand you over to Jorge.
Thank you very much. Well, I will try to analyze what is the situation of... okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. Well, I will try to divide my presentation in two parts. The first one will consist of analyzing which is the context the physical retail has to deal with. And the second part will be the 10 strategies I understand shopping centers must follow to survive and success in these times of digital transformation. So, as explained, part of Broadway Malian is an studio that started in the UK 61 years ago. This is our distribution globally. Here in Asia, we are in Shanghai, Mumbai, and Singapore. I'm personally based in Madrid, and I'm looking after projects in Europe and Latin America. And I specialize really in retail and shopping centers. And to understand the future, I think we need to come back to the past and try to see where are we coming from. And I think we are coming from a long time ago, 10,000 years ago, when we invented agriculture. And we were able to accumulate surplus. And that made us to establish in cities. And that was the moment when we were able to start to do retail and invent retail. So cities and retail started together. And this is an image of an old city in the Mesopotamia, 3,500 years ago. That central space was, at the same time, has a government function, but as well was the market. And when we look through the history, that remains the general situation. In the classical cities, the governmental space was at the same time the place for the market and for the interchange. You see it in the Foro or in the Agoras in Greece and Rome. Even we can analyze these other samples, for example, the bazaar in Istanbul, where it is impossible to differentiate the retail from the city fabric. No? With the technology, we were able to develop new typologies. For example, in the 70s, we were able to put together everything under one roof, and was the origin of the department stores. And last century, because of the private cars, we were able to send shopping centers out of the city. That was the moment when retail declared the independence and feel that could be autonomous and reachable by private car in a crossing of two roadways. No? But what is the situation now? The situation now is basically under this tsunami, this technological tsunami. It's a kind of a massive disruption we are facing that consists of a series of transformations like the mobile internet, the advanced robotics, the 3D printing. We were talking about all this during these sessions today. And that's affecting our sector. We are living the transformation and the rising of the e-commerce. And we see how e-commerce is progressing upwards. And in 2015, it represented a 7% of the whole sales. But for 2021, will be around the 17.5. So it's a continuous growing mood, which is challenging the brick and mortar retail. No? And we need to see what to do in order to survive. We could be tempted to think that technology is going to sort out all our needs. We have now appliances capable to decide when they have to be replenished. So what do? Nothing, because they work by their own. Or even if we have doubts, we could ask Alexa about them, and we would receive an answer. But at the end of the day, we are human beings, and we want to feel the texture, the smell. We want to interact with other people, and that's inevitable. And that's where brick and mortar has a role. And that's part of our philosophy as architects. We are really implementing a methodology based on the human interaction with our clients. And that's the reason why we organize all our projects on design workshops, which are the way to be hands-on, drawing in real time and sorting out the design of these shopping centers, as you can see in these images. Now we are living this process of transformation, seeing that the brick and mortar operators are trying to become digital. You see Zara, for example, in the text, or the digital monsters like Amazon trying to develop a human face. And we start to see some physical units like Amazon Books, for example. And we can use technology to obtain this fusion between the online and offline. And all this transformation is provoking some global shifts. And I want to underline 4 of them, which are really important. The household size reduction, the aging population, the urbanization, and the sharing economy. And going quickly through them, the first one, the household size reduction, is a massive trend and very important to be considered because the size of families are going down. Look at this chart, it's very, very impressive. By the middle of 19th century, the average of people living in a single house was more than 12 people, while in 2011, it was already 2.5 person per house, and we continue going down. If we look at the proportion of members of families in the UE, we have now a lot of families just formed by 2 persons, 1 parent and 1 child. And this is reducing the size of the houses, but increasing the amount of units. So we need more units, but smaller. And that's where this kind of idea of the co-living appears, because we can reduce the private part of our life, but we need a lot more communal services to be shared with others. This is very important because this population over the 65 years old has the money to buy and to buy our products. So we need to look to them with careful. And that's the reason we are starting to work more and more in this kind of senior developments. This is a kind of a senior condominium in the UK. So developments specifically focus into this sector of the population, where as well we need to put together retail, because these people need to have retail close to them. They cannot do massive displacements to get what they need. In Singapore, for example, by 2050, half of the population will be over 65 years old. And that's the reason why Singapore is really taking care of this, developing this kind of health cities oriented to this senior population, where as well retail is a very important component, and it's retail of proximity. These people cannot go far away, so we need to think in retail going closer to them, and that's where these ideas of mobile retail arise, you know, and makes a lot of sense. The second global shift is the process of urbanization. And 2008 was a very interesting year, because it was the year when the urban population equaled the rural population. You see the red curve is the urban population, the global urban population. And from that moment onwards, this curve keeps going upwards. while the rural population start to decrease, to diminish. And it's expected by the middle of this century, 70% of the population will live in cities. And we have to remember that cities are related to retail. So more cities, more retail, and that's a great opportunity we have. As well, that change is transforming the chart of the ranking of economies. No, the typical ranking we had with the US, China, whatever, is totally transformed. The expectation for 2050 is China and India really to domain the global economy. So that's part of the transformation. The next global shift I want to mention is the sharing economy, because all this technology is transforming the way we consume, and the new generations, millennials, really want to share everything and value things because of its real value and not because of its price, and they are not interested in ownership but in using stuff, and that's where this new kind of attitude start to appear. I don't need a drill. I do not need a drill. I need a hole in the wall. So people want to have access to things, not to be the owner of them. And that's the origin of this kind of typologies, the co-living, which is these formulas where the private house is very small, but you have a very large list of communal areas. As for example, in this project we did in the UK, you see that you have a very small part for you private, but then you have a lot of communal areas to share with them and to create a kind of a community. No? As well in terms of working spaces, you know, the appearing of these co-working formulas, which some developers of shopping centers are incorporating into the projects, as you can see in Westfield and the Bespoke brand, or in this other sample that is our project in Malaga, where we incorporate some co-working area in a shopping center besides the train station there. So, based on all this analysis of the context, I want to point out the 10 strategies that brick and mortar retail must follow to survive and success in front of all this transformation. And these are them. We will go through them with some samples. The first one is that retail is the main anchor of mixed-use developments. And because we are going to this kind of short distance life, so we are trying to get things closer to ourselves, it's important to think about the mixed use, and mixed use, the main anchor is retail. So we are transforming the typology of cities from that monocentric one to the polycentric ones. And in every new center, which is a neighborhood, we need a hub with retail as the main anchor. So this is a nice sample. This is a recently opened shopping center we did in Seville. It's a sample of mixed use because it compounds, it includes an office and hotel tower, a cultural center, and then the shopping center itself. But this, I think, is very successful because you can go by walking, it's very near to the city center, it's open air, and it's mixed use. So there are three factors that made it successful. Mixed use is to get the city and put it in vertical position, no? Superimposing the different uses. And this is the transformation we are seeing. This kind of old retail formats out of town, surrounded by parkings, are now being transformed more and more into a lot more village-oriented formats, which are more livable and try to imitate the city quality. And that's what Walmart is announcing to do. They are worried because of this declination of retail, and they are launching this plan to convert Walmart's units into community centers by occupying part of the parking space with small retailers to create a center of town. The second strategy is to add better food and beverage offer to our shopping centers. Normally in the past, food and beverage was just a food court with very low quality. And we can eat in front of the computer, but we cannot eat online. So by adding better offer, better food and beverage offer, we increase the attractivity of our centers. And I live in Spain. That is funny, but it's one of the countries in the world that people spend more to have dinner out, which is good for this. But I think that's happening everywhere in the globe. This is a sample of a refurbishment we did in Murcia, in the south of Spain. There was a virtually dead center. Just 2 operators were trading. The rest of the center was empty. But we relaunched it by creating a kind of a gourmet market. And it became a feature. It became so attractive that the center was recovered and started to trade again. This is another project we're working now in Seville, in the center of town. It's a former market that was abandoned 20 years ago, and now we are going to transform it into a food hall. That the kind of uses is attracting people out from home and from internet. Or this competition we recently won to refurbish a shopping center in Portugal, in Porto, and the idea consisted of creating a food hall in the terrace, in the upper floor. The third strategy is this new consideration that instead of thinking in shopping centers, we start to think in shopping resorts, which is to give priority to the experiential and the destination factor of them. And this probably is one of the most interesting samples in Europe right now, into Costa del Sol. We are working for in Torremolinos. It's a massive development. It's a touristic area. It's 240,000 square meters GLA. But the main idea here is that the element that is anchoring all the uses is a kind of a central park of 1 kilometer length. And around that massive park with a lot of water feature, outdoor activities, restaurant terraces, they accommodate the various components, the typical shopping center, the home-oriented mall area, the leisure area, a congress center, a hotel, a luxury mall. There is even an anti-mall for that people that hate malls to go there. And this is the kind of vision you see, draw it by hand, which is the way we work. The strategy number 4 is give priority to public realm and placemaking. It's related with the previous strategy, no? A place that is more than just shopping. We need to get rid of that isolated buildings in the middle of nowhere. We need to now to create a good ambience to attract the people. And this is another sample of a project we did for IKEA in Spain. They had developed at the time a factory outlet, very funny. They developed the retail park with an IKEA unit somewhere there, and in the center of the parking they had developed a factory outlet. But the factory outlet were not visited enough, and the way to make it attractive was to add this fantastic green proposal and transform it into a kind of a shopping in the park idea. And by doing that, we hope it's going to be successful. Even more traditional shoppings like this one we did for Carrefour are taking in account these concerns about creation of public realm and better landscape. This is a center in the south of Spain, in Huelva, where we are using green walls and all this quality for the internal malls. And this is another project we have now, which I'm very interested in because it's what I think the new version of retail parks. It's confidential in Spain, but it's a kind of a new idea that is combining the big boxes with an area of the village, just to be able to allocate as well small retailers and to create this kind of ambience for restaurants and more human scale. Number 5 strategy is to give priority to create emotions and to reinforce the brand of the shopping center. This is very important in digital times. So I want to show this other sample, which I think was another very successful refurbishment we did last year. Was opened in November. It's a center in the north of Spain, in Ferrol. Was called Dolce Vita Odeon, but we transformed the name. We changed it and just naming it Odeon. And we used the letter O as the pattern to reclad the whole building with this second layer, which is a kind of a double skin, backlit, and it's creating a fantastic effect that produced a kind of a revolution in the city. This was the image of the building before, or even in this other photo you can see this access, how it was really horrible center. But we, by reinforcing this new image, creating the new brand, the new double skin facade, and underlying the accesses, we pushed the center up with no much budget, because this was a transformation we did with just 4 million euros for such a big center, really. As well, this is a sample of Fan Mallorca we did for Carrefour property in Palma de Mallorca, but I want to show it because we are not longer trying to superimpose an aesthetic to all operators. We are giving the freedom to operators to express themselves. And in this case, we have this flagship H&M unit in our main facade, and we created this special facade for them, and they are like a feature, and that help us to improve the general image of the center. No? Strategy number 6 is this fusion between online, offline, creating this idea of a third place. I think we talk about this a lot during this session today, and it's something others could say better than me because I'm not an expert in technology. But we see how our clients are incorporating progressively more and more technology in the malls. This is a sample of another mall we did into Asturias, where you can interact with the space through these devices. Number 7, and related with the previous, is the importance of the interior design. In the past, was not so important. We considered that the most important aspect was the functionality of the shopping centers. But now we need to create emotions, and interiors are becoming more and more and more important. It was what we call superpowered interiors. By reshaping and refurbishing the interiors of a shopping center, you can reposition it dramatically, really. And this is a sample. This is, you will say that this is a shopping center. No, it's an airport. It's the Lisbon airport that we transformed into a kind of shopping center, if you want, and by applying a fantastic interior design. Or this sample closest to here, this is in China, in Suzhou, where we did the interiors with these organic shapes and transformed totally the aesthetic of the center. Or this project in Singapore, samples of toilets. Toilets are becoming more and more important because with a very constrained investment, you can change totally the feeling of the shopping center towards the customer. All customers use toilets in the shopping center, and it's a way to communicate the change and the values of your company. Even value retail operators, for example, Primark, Ian mentioned Primark before. We did more than 50 Primarks in Spain, and they are investing more and more in the quality of the space and the cost of the fit out, despite they are value retailers, because people want to buy cheap, but feeling very well. The strategy number 8 is this coming back of the big boxes into town. And this is incredible, but it's happening in Europe very clearly. IKEA is abandoning this strategy of the big blue boxes, and they are coming back to center of town by going downwards in size with a lot of small units, not just in high street, but in shopping centers too. Because people go through the internet and see all products IKEA has, they don't need to take a car and spend 3 hours in a labyrinth walking around showrooms. So IKEA has to go closer to the people, and that's the strategy. The same in respect to big hypermarkets. We've shown the idea of Walmart. Carrefour has its own idea, which is to go back to the city with smaller formats. The Carrefour Market, Express, City, etc. Strategy number 5 is related with the previous, but just the contrary, is that this new technology permits that the small stores can survive as well if they implement right the technology. There is a program by Alibaba to provide support to the small convenience retailers, and that can improve a lot by understanding better what are the demands of the customers they have. And it's a kind of a marriage between the digital monster and the small convenience stores. And I like that because I think convenience store has a lot of future. The same this format of bingo box, this kind of small modules that you can move from one place to the other and get closer to the people in the center of towns. We are seeing a kind of a revolution in the convenience retailers, especially here in Asia. We see how in Korea they are competing to be more and more attractive, introducing technology, or even in Taiwan, 7-Eleven, making the experience better. And finally, the last trend, I would say, or strategy, is the transformation of the mobility formulas. And I think this is a kind of a revolution. Previously we saw a presentation about parkings. I think we are facing a major change in terms of mobility, and it's happening faster and faster, really. Just in 100 years, we abandoned horses and came into this saturation of cars. And now we are starting to see this new phase. We don't know exactly how it will be, which is the automation of cars that can drive themselves. At the beginning, we thought cars will be the gate to the freedom, and we imagined this kind of publicities, no? But many occasions, this is what we obtained, and millennials are getting rid of that whole idea of to own its own car. That was the basis of this kind of shopping centers in the middle of nowhere. Now they prefer to get a car with a mobile to pay per minute and leave it wherever, and that's all. They don't care about getting a car and have a parking, looking after them. And this is sample of Madrid, where probably is one of the cities with most ratio of shareable electric cars right now. And it's incredible what is happening there. So in the future, we are going to have a lot of parking redundancy. When? In the previous presentation, they talk about 20 years. I think it will be quicker than that. They are already testing driverless cars, and the consequence of the driverless cars introduction is that we will require less and less parking. Driverless cars could go somewhere else, not to stay in the city center in expensive space. That's the advantage. So we need to think about possible reutilization of that parking we have. And as well, we need to think as developers, if we are now doing new shopping centers, we need to think seriously if putting together parkings or not. Or if we do it, how are we going to reuse them in the future? So probably we need to do it above ground with certain height to be able to convert it into other uses. That's sometimes of conversion of parkings into a showroom, but they are already converting them in many different things. In the United States, there is a plan to transform 360,000, to create 360,000 public housing by reutilizing park and ride facilities in the surroundings of the main cities because of the driverless cars. So driverless cars are going forward. We are more or less at level 1, 2 now in the level of autonomy, but very shortly we will get cars at level 5. And we need to rethink how shopping centers are designed, because we will need to have massive drop-offs. Shopping centers are going to be like airports or like hotels. People will come with this kind of mobility. They want to get out into the center, and the car goes. So we need to create a totally different design to permit that to happen. And we need to think if part of that cars are going to park or go somewhere, and it's a massive debate. These images are part of a think tank we organized a month ago to discuss about this with traffic advisors, because it's a major issue, and we have already some clients worried about that and asking the question, okay, if I need now, for example, we have a sample of that project in the south of Spain. Right now, the traffic advisor is saying that they need 10,000 cars parking. But they anticipate that in the future, maybe in 2050, it will be enough with just 3,000. Because the rest of the spaces will be replaced by this kind of mobility. So the doubt of the client is, how do we do this temporary parking? In the US, they are taking this very seriously, and they are already putting together the new traffic regulations for the driverless cars. And it's interesting because this autonomous mobility are going to sort out what was a problem in the past, this first mile and last mile part of the journey. Because traffic transport can cover part of your need of transportation, but there are always a gap. But with these devices, we will cover the whole route. And that arrives to the last image, the last proposal, which is a project we are doing in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur, for the new station that is going to allocate a high-speed train to connect Kuala Lumpur with Singapore. And I think this is a sample of the future. The future is create new pieces of cities anchored on transport hubs, where retail is the main anchor, connecting all the different mixed use, and where public realm is the center of the development. As you can see in this image, there is a massive park, which is fantastic, and will give the character of this new neighborhood. And this is the kind of developments we are looking at in the future, and I think this is the future. So remembering that retail and cities started together, I think they have a common future together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jorge. I think that was excellent in terms of just looking at your company involvement in some of the placemaking that we were discussing earlier. And I think what's interesting is obviously the impact there on the technology as well, and how it's disrupting everything. And I suppose I've got one quick question for you, and then I'll throw open, because I'm sure that there's loads of questions for this session. I now run an extremely boring shopping centre. Looking at some of those images, I must see if you can come over to Ireland and sort it. In terms of old centres and the challenge around owners and level of investment to realise some of that, how do you think some of those owners can get round that?
Well, that's the typical question we are trying to answer every day, because most of our projects are refurbishment and repositioning of shopping centers, of existing shopping centers. Right now, for example, we have around 40 projects in our studio in Madrid. And I will say that 35 of them are repositioning of existing shopping centers. And in the majority of them, the landlords have not endless money to do it. They have a very constrained budget. So we need to be intelligent enough to see where to apply that investment. But I will say that I could mention you projects where we are dealing with a budget of €500,000 to up to 10 million euros. All that wide range of money to reposition a center, depending on the size and on the depth of the refurbishment. No? But an average of 3-4 million is what we are dealing with to really relaunch a center fully, which is, I think, is a matter of thinking and intelligence in the way you do it, more than amount of money.
Okay, I'll go back and ask if they've got that. Now, is there any questions in the audience there?
No, any question?
Okay, well, I think your strategies, etc., were excellent in terms of the 10 viewpoints you had there. Mixed use, placemaking, community, I think it all says the same sort of themes. And I think one final question, and I'll give you a final word if you want one. But in terms of looking at the cities and the likes of the Malaysian train station there, how do you see, again, across the big cities around the world where space is very constrained, and take Hong Kong, obviously build upwards rather than outwards, how do you see some of these coming to fruition as well, the challenges there?
Basically, I believe in this idea of the polycentric cities. So even in massive cities, you can differentiate neighborhoods and try to provide each neighborhood with its own center of town that sum up all the needs for your life. So you could have the retail, but the working spaces, the leisure parks and facilities. So I think that's the challenge of cities, to really reshape neighborhoods, providing them with central elements for a proximity of life. I think that's the main idea.
Okay, thank you for that. Anyone got a question? Someone must have one. Thank you. You win a prize.
You touched on a point there about refurbishment being one of your primary drivers now in the industry. Do you see that as continuing in the future, and also how do you think that might be different in Asia compared to Europe?
Well, I think everywhere shopping centers have to have a program of updating constantly. I would say, no more than 4 years, you need to implement certain transformation in your centers. If you want to maintain attractiveness, no? It's a must. And I think it's, despite the geographical location, I understand that's common in all the globe, because you are challenged by a lot of other competitors, not just in the surroundings, but in the internet. You need to update your center to the new trends, to the new aspirations, to the new lifestyles, and that's a constant transformation to maintain the attractiveness.
Okay, well, thank you, Jorge.
Okay.
I think everyone enjoyed that session, and I think we're all now going back to try and get more money to get you on board. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
So next up is Jorge. He's from Spain. I hope that was pronounced okay, was it?